Now, we're all familiar with the story of Otto Warmbier. Now, he's the young man who went to the DPRK, stole a poster, committed an act of indignity towards the DPRK. He was arrested, charged, and sentenced to labor for what he did. Now, sometime later, he was released on medical compassionate grounds, sent back to the United States, where he eventually died. He was said to be in a coma when he came back. Now, the real story of what's happened is clouded in a great deal of absolute mystery. But here are the things we do know. We do know his family, the United States government, lied about what he went through. Both of them, the father of the young man, Frank Warmbier, and the United States government, insisted that he had been tortured, and that's why the situation got to where it is. Now, they insisted that this is true, but now a recent study done on the remains of the young man confirmed that that was an absolute and utter lie, and something they did merely to push hostilities against the DPRK. Now, they said that he had been physically tortured, yet the examiners said that Warmbier had a small selection of scars on his body, but nothing that was too severe, nothing that would indicate actual torture. Now, in an interview with Fox and Friends, Fred Warmbier said that his son's teeth had been terribly damaged when he got back from the country. He said it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his bottom teeth. The actual statement from the examiner says the teeth are in natural and good repair. His father outright lied. The death of this young man is being used for propaganda purposes against the DPRK. Now, I understand that they would do that. I mean, these countries are not getting along. They're in very diametrically opposed positions. But what we see here is the amount of dishonesty that's been being used. Now, the medical examiner also did say that he saw no overt signs of what killed him. So they can't actually determine, other than, the coma that eventually killed him, the claimed infection. Now, I have stood firm on my ground that, given all this, the fact that we don't know what really killed him, this is what I think happened. I believe that it was a suicide attempt by the young man. Now, he was sentenced for quite a long time. And when somebody that young is sentenced to something like that, that especially doing it in a hostile country, in a language you don't understand, in a country whose culture you're not integrated into, that can be quite overwhelming. Now, the reason I think that is if he was tortured, which it's proven that he wasn't, the DPRK would have an interest in covering it up. But they didn't cover it up because there was no torture. If they had, there would be no interest in them to just kill him, because he could have been used as a bargaining chip, which is what he would have been used for at some future date. So there would be no interest in them harming him. There is the possibility that another inmate harmed him. Oh, there's this Yankee son of a bitch who's in my country, and he's being treated better than I am because he's a foreigner and because they want to use him at some point. Could have done that. But I don't think that's the case either. I believe that it was an act of suicide. I believe that he had hung himself because there was, in the original examination, mentions of marks around his neck, which would seem consistent with hanging. They're not saying that he was hanged, but there were marks around his neck, which I think indicate that he possibly tried to hang himself, with looking at the possibility of 10 years doing hard labor. That might be too much for someone who's from a very privileged upper middle class family to bear, someone having to see kind of the reality of the world, and it might have overwhelmed him. But I think, given the tremendous overtly Christian nature of his family, that they would lie in order not just to save his face, but to save their face. If they're a deeply Christian family, then you know that their views towards suicide are. So I think that this was something that they did to cover up the fact that he had tried to commit suicide. And I think it's the only scenario that really makes sense, given the physical evidence that has been made to the public. But, we see the United States government lied. His father lied about his son's condition, all just to forward the interests of U.S. imperialism. Now, I understand the father was probably pretty angry, about what happened to his son, when his son does have to, take responsibility for his actions. I don't really buy the idea that he got an infection and got sick. I believe that he genuinely was attempted to commit suicide, and the reason the DPRK tried to cover that up by saying it was an infection was to protect their own image, that they wouldn't look irresponsible for being in a position where he could attempt to do something like this. So while I don't believe the DPRK's story about him getting an infection, we now have absolute proof that the story by the United States and the young man's family was also a complete lie. I stand firm on my position, as I previously described, that Otto Warmbier tried to commit suicide, and that his family is trying to cover up due to their ultra-religious nature. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.